boys and girls, welcome to my channel. I'm ForClassic and welcome to BenchART. So for today what I do have in here is Persona 5 Strikers, a game developed by P Studio and also Omega Force. This is using their in-house engine and it is a quite demanding game, but it does run. It does run on our GT 740M or the GT 920M or the GT 825M. You can run this game at 720p low settings and by using resolution scaling. So as usual, the minimum requirements in here are asking GPUs more powerful than the 740M, alright? And these are the results without recording. So at 720p low settings, not using any resolution scaling, my performance was pretty much lower than 30 frames per second all the time, so I can't really recommend. But when you do use 60% of resolution scaling, my experience was above all, it was above 30 frames per second pretty much all the time, with only 3% of the time dropping below, but that was nothing special. But if you really want to be fine with it, you can go with 50% of resolution scaling. If you do use 50% of resolution scaling, your frame rate will be always above 30 frames per second. At least it was on this specific fight. So this was the benchmark scene that I did use to get those results. It is this specific fight, which is exactly at the beginning of the game. I played the game for 1 or 2 hours and this was by far the most demanding moment. And it is quite obviously why. There are tons of enemies on screen. Each enemy have its own shadows, even with shadows on low. All of these characters have shadows. There are tons of effects going on, particles all over the place. So that's a lot for an old GPU like this. I know this looks like, you know, might not look that good, but that's a lot of stuff going on in here for a GPU like the 740M or the GT 920M. That's a lot. But like I was telling you, this is considerably more demanding than the rest of the moments that I did try it out. So this specific moment, it is a huge stress test, while the other areas, the GPU, it is completely fine. So that's the point. So for now, my recommendation, it is 60% of resolution scaling based on this specific moment. But for example, if I would test other environments, which is more calm and without you know, big fights like this one, I would probably go and recommend you higher resolution scaling because the GPU can deal with it, but it can't deal with this amount of stuff. So I'm not really sure how many times we will find fights in scenarios like that, because I just played for 1 or 2 hours and Persona is a game that will take you about 30 to 50 hours to complete. But the first fights that you get after that one, they are really easy to run. It's just that specific fight that is very demanding. So if more forward into the game you catch more fights like that one, well, in that case, 60% of resolution scaling, it won't give you any trouble if you want to maintain that. So this game, it is, well, it's a Japanese game and it suffers exactly from the same issues of any other Japanese game out there. Most of the Japanese game suffers from this issue, which is it does not support frame skipping. All the physics and all the kind of stuff that works with the game are tied to the frame rate. So you either need to select 30 or you either select 60. If you select 60 frames per second, your frame rate can go up to 60. It doesn't mean that you reach there. You are not going to get 60 frames per second with this GPU. But what happens really is that if you are getting like 30 or 40 frames per second, when you did select 60, your game will run in slow motion because it doesn't support frame skipping. So that's why I do recommend you to select a limitation of 30 frames per second, and you really need to maintain those 30 frames per second if you want to play the game without any slowdowns. So again, to finalize this, just play the game at 720p, low settings and 60% of resolution scaling. If you are having a bad performance, try reducing to 50%, which is 0.5 in this game, and that's about it. So let's talk now about the game. So Persona 5 Strikers, it is not really what I was expecting. At first I thought this game was simply a spin-off from Persona 5, and at some point it is, but it's not entirely the case. Persona 5 Strikers, it is a sequel to Persona 5 in its story. So Persona 5 Strikers takes place 6 months after the events of Persona 5, so which makes it a sequel. So all the story that you are going to see inside this visual novel is going to take place after the events of Persona 5. So this is a sequel. But in other hands, it is also a spin-off, because contrary to the previous Persona's games, which have been using turn-based combat, Persona 5 Strikers takes a different approach, as you saw in the video, and you have kind of a real-time combat that resembles kind of a crossover between Dynasty Warriors and Persona gameplay. So this might be kind of a hit and miss for the fans, because the fans might want to have more of Persona 5 story, and that's fully okay, but they also might want to have the same combat approach as the predecessors, and that's not really possible in Persona 5 Strikers, since they now moved on to some kind of real-time combat. For me it is fine, but it is different. I can no longer relax as much when I'm playing this game in combat mode. You no longer have that full time to think and take your own decisions. So it's a different combat style, but above all, the game itself, the visual novel moments, your friends and all that kind of stuff remains as is, as you know before. Alright, that's the good part. It isn't being as well received as the other Personas. For example, Persona 5 scores between 90 to 95 on Metacritic, while Persona 5 Strikers, it is a slightly lower score, with scores between 80 to 90, mostly between 85 to 90. So it's still an awesome game, but it is just different, alright? And that's the thing that might be scaring some people away, especially huge fans from Persona, from this game. But still, yeah, it's a sequel, so if you want to know more of the story, you need to play this one. So on Steam, you know, I'm quite surprised because the score on Steam, it is 96%. Usually people criticize the Japanese ports, but as far as I've seen the port, it is, you know, it's good. It's a good port. It fails a little bit with some stuff like the frame skipping, which is not supported, and this is very usual on Japanese titles. So you either need to go with 30 frames per second or 60, depending on what your machine can achieve. It is also the maximum frame rate, it is also 60 frames per second. This is very typical on Japanese games too. But everything just works, keyboard and mouse works, gamepad works, everything just works fine. The only thing that I feel that could be better implemented, it is the anti-aliasing inside the game. It's a blur filter that also affects the text, so despite I'm using in this video, this is something that I do recommend you to turn off. If you want to use anti-aliasing, you can use the resolution scaling if your machine can handle it, and use values above 1.0. Of course, this is something that is not possible on my laptop GPUs, since they struggle a little bit with this game. So I think that's all that I want to talk about Persona 5 Strikers. Hope you've been enjoying the rest of the gameplay, which is just this dungeon, and I do hope to see you soon. Goodbye.
Take this!
Ooh, you got an... Enemy ahead! Joker, try that persona you just got!
Let's go! Pixie! Ravage them!
focus on the big shadow for now.
Persona! Got it!
Okay.
Take this! Come! You're mine! Now!
Say your
It's
prayers.
over! All right, Joker! Showtime! Pixie! Here!
Whoa, you make this look easy. Whoa, that was amazing.
Fire! Persona! Take this!
Thanks.